Hi, this is LinkedIn Live, Techwire on LinkedIn Live. I'm Chantal Allam, and I'm here today with Kaleido's co-founders, Sophia Lopez and Steve Cerveny. Thank you so much for being with me.
Good job. Great to be here.
Of course, Kaleido is a blockchain startup. And it's one of the startups that we are featuring as part of our Tomorrow's Unicorns, a look into Raleigh's $1 billion tech pipeline. And you guys are one of the 6 startups that we've decided to feature. And we're doing so because you're former IBMers. You found, since launching Kaleido's cross-cloud platform in 2018, it has been deployed in a range of industries, generating more than 1 billion blocks mined on the Ethereum blockchain. You're headquartered in Raleigh-founded Capital Club. You've landed partnerships with Amazon Web Services and Azure, Microsoft. And you already count corporations like Shell, Sony, Citibank as users. So that's quite impressive for a 3-year startup. Before I want to dive into this, I want to first give a shout out to Innovate Raleigh. They're underwriting the series. They're going to be holding their summit in a few weeks' time on October 29th at the Raleigh Convention Center. It's going to be in person. And I also want to give a shout out to Jason Gilligan at Earfluence, who is hosting us today. This is the first time Techwire has been on LinkedIn Live coming from an actual studio. So we're very grateful and fortunate for that. But let's get started. So when I interviewed you guys for the series, it was a few months back. I went to the Capital Club in the heart of downtown Raleigh, and Sophia and I started chatting, and we realized that we both live in Chapel Hill, and we actually lived across the street from each other for a period of time a few years back. Circa 2015. Kind of around the time that you guys were starting to get Kaleido off the ground. So can you take me back to that time? And by the way, if anyone's listening, you're welcome to write in with questions and comments. I have Sophia and Steve with me, and hopefully they'll answer all of our questions. So yeah, take me back to that time when you were living across the street from me.
Stranger than fiction.
I was so busy, I guess I never spent any time in the neighborhood doing anything.
I never bumped into you, that's for sure.
Yeah, just get in my car, go to work, or work virtually. Well, I guess immediately prior to that, just going back, the prior decade or so, both Steve and I had been in the enterprise space, so had lived through various generations of other emerging technologies. Analytics, there was a big push around mobile, obviously a big push around cloud. And prior to that was in business process management, integration, and then core enterprise systems. So around 2015, started working on blockchain and really realizing this wasn't just a conversation in the data center. It was all the way up to the CEO, the C-suite, CEO's office, board level conversation. And that this was a technology that was really going to take all of the older, decades-old infrastructure and so reimagine business processes. There's already a movement towards industries working together in more of an ecosystem approach, and that with now converging with cloud and just digital transformation. So Steve and I ended up working together very closely in launching the industry's first blockchain as a service, and worked with hundreds of clients over the first number of years in the early days of enterprise blockchain.
At IBM.
And then really saw that clients needed a lot more than just a blockchain node as a service, delivered via the cloud. They needed a full stack solution that was really built and imagined as software as a service that could help them build true solutions in their respective industries.
And for the record, blockchain, for those who don't know, blockchain is just simply a digital ledger that is immutable, that can't change. That's enterprise blockchain is what exactly?
Yeah, I'll let Steve take a chance
Yeah,
here.
so most folks know about Bitcoin at this point, and many folks know about Ethereum, the second sort of public community that came along. And Bitcoin's over a decade old at this point. But what happened, around 2015 was enterprises looked at the underlying technology and said, oh, how you're doing a database here, how you kind of trustlessly form consensus and agree, and then you write an immutable, record in the database, just like a ledger. This is a really powerful construct, and it can really help enterprises stay in sync and coordinate in a much more efficient way. And then the idea of automating that through agreements that are kind of what we call smart contracts in the space, where you deploy those ahead of time, and then they're just there and they're running. There's this huge degree of automation and this level of trust or coordination that has not been possible, in the existing sort of legacy tech stack that Sophia was walking through.
So you guys saw a gap in the market around 2016.
Yeah, enterprise blockchain started around 2015. So at that time, Ethereum was starting to take hold, and we certainly looked at it at the time. Actually, IBM went a different direction and built its own open source, open blockchain code base, and then decided, hey, the way technologies are built today, you build them in the open with open source.
Mm-hmm.
So we went to the Linux Foundation, created Hyperledger with a number of other early leaders in the space. And that code base was donated, became the basis of Hyperledger Fabric.
Mm-hmm.
So people started taking some points of view in the market about sort of the underlying code that runs the blockchains. When Steve and I started Kaleido, we have two technical co-founders as well. We really felt that clients would need flexibility and choice. Different open source protocols could be better for different use cases, depending what industry they're in, and trade-offs between privacy, performance, and other factors. So we actually run all of the top 3 enterprise protocols. You mentioned Ethereum earlier. Mm-hmm. We also run Hyperledger Fabric, and we run another code base called Porta, which is oriented for financial services industries. And there were a large number of banks who became members of a consortium called R3 that was supporting that. So we have those top 3 enterprise protocols.
Mm-hmm. And so you broke off by yourselves in 2017. Uh-huh. And you incubated as part of an accelerator that's run by Consensus. Can you tell me about that, who Consensus is and how you got involved in their accelerator?
Yeah, so Ethereum was set up as a public project. They created a foundation, and they wanted really no company to be behind it. But one of the co-founders of Ethereum, went out and formed a company called Consensus, and really wanted to invest and incubate, blockchain-based companies. And so we were, one of those early ones that really had more of an enterprise focus, which Ethereum's roots really didn't have any enterprise sort of a mindset. And it's been a lot of fun to see over just a small number of years, kind of the cross-pollination between basically crypto anarchists and enthusiasts and collectors to us who are more focused in the enterprise space, and just sort of innovation that's going in all directions. And what we're seeing now is really an acceleration of how technologies like NFTs, which we may get into a little bit today. A lot of techies have heard of that, that are being used for things like collectibles. Now enterprises are looking at those, saying, hey, what about turning a license plate into an NFT or a VIN number or a digital identity, or and really just we are at the beginning still of a huge wave of innovation that's going to come off of all of these decentralized technologies.
Mm-hmm. And so, was the pandemic a turning point for it? I mean, did this help the acceleration, the pandemic? How has it affected your company?
Yeah, I would say from day one of our guiding principles of building Kaleido was to help make these decentralized technologies like blockchain radically simple for enterprises, governments, organizations to adopt, so that society could get to the benefits. And you see other waves of innovation, even like AI, was for decades and decades. People were working on the algorithms, and it was often very esoteric. It was hard to adopt. And it was just recently now that's starting to benefit people, and you can build that into systems. So we wanted to accelerate that adoption curve for blockchain. with the way we built the platform out and made it all available, via very, APIs, very simple to consume for developers. So really accelerating things like non-fungible tokens that Steve mentioned. 3 years ago, we were working with Sony, Fox, Heineken, and others with digital collectibles, also like Toshiba and Kroger digital coupons. And now you see, in a relatively short time frame, Sotheby's is auctioning like paintings worth tens of millions of dollars based on NFTs. And I think in the enterprise IT space, that was a very rapid sort of adoption of these new technologies that's driving whole new business models.
Mm-hmm. So you're seeing a rapid acceleration in the space.
So that was in part, I think, guided even before COVID by a technology platform where it's software as a service. You pay for what you use. It's free to get started. You sort of pay as you grow into higher tiers as you're getting more productive value. So we already saw a lot of great traction before COVID. But then when COVID happened, you saw even industries like insurance and healthcare that are traditionally the slowest to adopt like new technologies just because they're heavily regulated, more conservative industries. All of a sudden, all the insurance brokers, they're sitting at home. They can't go into the office. So you think of something as simple in the US as knowing, like, is there a master death record if someone dies? And this is very important, like during a pandemic. Some major insurers are looking around and saying, we've had this problem for decades. We don't have a single version of the truth. We can't easily, the family members of the policyholder, they might not even know he or she had a policy. They have to go around with like paper copies, 10, 15 copies of a death certificate to go to the bank, to go to the funeral home. And they wanted to solve these problems.
Yeah.
So we worked with people like Nationwide and Prudential because they said, we need to figure out how to get to a single digital shared view of who's died in the US so we could provide a much better experience in terms of being able to move quickly on, claims and working with policyholders. Mm-hmm. So that's just one example of how COVID directly impacts certain use cases that have been problematic for a long time, but we see it across all the industries, mm-hmm. like a huge pickup. And now's the time to move to the cloud. Now's the time to digitally transform. And we want to solve some of these problems as an industry. And we've been wanting to do this for decades. Like one of our clients is running a supply chain with 80% of the world's grain supply. Mm-hmm. They showed us a diagram from 10 years ago. They mm-hmm. said, we wanted to do this, but now we have the technology to do it.
And they're using Kaleido's platform.
Yes.
It just seems like you have so many use cases and so many who's who of companies that are kind of using Kaleido now.
I think we've seen a macro view of, companies accelerating their digital transformation mm-hmm. roadmap. Mm-hmm. And blockchain falls under that umbrella. So to your question, we've seen a huge acceleration really across the board of companies willing to be a little more experimental, to move faster, and under pressure from their own organizations to really adapt.
And these big companies are coming to you because you promise a quick button solution to blockchain.
That's one of the things we offer, but we're enterprise grade. All of the engineering leadership has just decades and decades with working with enterprise systems, the highest levels of security, availability, disaster recovery, compliance, like things. There's different compliance standards like ISO 27K, SOC 2, Type 2 that you need to have in order to run these enterprise systems.
Yeah.
So it's a combination of, we're able to provide them flexibility and choice around all of the tools and tech, which is the best of breed in the open source in the market today. We run, manage, and operate that for them. So we're basically insulating them from the risk of some of these open source technologies if they were to try to run it themselves and skill up their teams. And, it's almost the daily changes in the code base at times, and then just becoming experts in that.
So it's not that easy.
Not that easy. And then being able to run that in production, 99.99 uptime, all of the things enterprises look for. It's a whole package. And there's a lot of stakeholders in an enterprise purchase. So there's the line of business owner who says, I need to do something better, faster, cheaper, or there's a whole new way to approach our business model using blockchain, decentralized technologies, or NFTs. Then you have on the other side of the house the information security team. They're in the risk and the compliance team. They are stakeholders. They have a say. There's all the users, the developers. So the developers want it to be easy to code to and adopt, and using a whole modern tech stack. But you have a lot of other important roles in enterprise when you're making a big decision like this.
Enterprise IT departments, the expectations are shifting. you don't get 3 years to go off and do a project anymore. You need to show something in 6 or 12 weeks, right? So some sort of a proof of concept or a proof of value. And so, if you're in those shoes, then you're going to go, try to find the most complete cloud solution. You're going to start very easily. And as these projects mature, managed services are really nice because you don't need to staff up 12 people and figure out how to do, reinvent the wheel yourself.
So it's cost effective, it's efficient, but also it does a lot of good. I think one of the most interesting use cases there's so many, but the I2I project that's happening in the Philippines. Can you tell me about that project and how they're using your platform?
Yeah, that was one of the first clients that we worked with early on, and it's been great to see them mature over the years. But they were, as you were mentioned, one of the largest banks in the Philippines, so Southeast Asia, and they wanted to focus on remittance payments. So they mapped out essentially, I think, about a 35-step process where a family member goes abroad, saves up money and wants to send it back home to the family in the Philippines. And because of all those hops, there were fees, there's a lot of elapsed time. And so, they were looking at the trustless nature of blockchain to say, hey, we can do this instantaneously. And there are a lot of folks focusing on just that value prop of real-time settlement. And that's a game changer in the financial services space. For I2I, they were able to pass on that value then to not just to their member banks, but they actually got together with hundreds of rural banks. So this is an interesting, proof point of how a single use case can really grow once you set up a network. You can build more and more on it. And so what Union Bank has done is gone to all hundreds of rural banks who are paper-based there. Who are essentially unbanked themselves, and have brought them into sort of leapfrogging all the generations of banking into a blockchain-based, payments network.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the result now, and we had the chairman of the board of Union Bank was on stage with us when we first announced publicly in New York over 3 years ago, and AWS was on stage with us as well, announcing the partnership. But he had said, there's 38 million unbanked Filipinos. So it's just really looking at how could we help all of those, fellow Filipinos. And when they calculated the amount of money they save on just one remittance, it's enough to feed the family for 1 to 2 weeks worth of food and daily expenses. So it really makes a big impact.
Mm-hmm. There's so many use cases. I think thousands, hundreds of thousands. But what does this mean for Kaleido? 3-year-old Raleigh-born startup.
Almost 4.
Almost 4.
Birthday soon in November.
Oh, what does this mean for Kaleido's trajectory?
Well, I think it's exciting, right? Every startup's dream is to be, there where a big market's forming. And what we're seeing with the blockchain market overall is kind of this intersection of what we would, there used to be more of a dichotomy of there's enterprise focus in blockchain, and then there's public blockchains in crypto essentially. And what I'd predict over the next few years, we're seeing is kind of all of these things coming together and blockchain technologies becoming just more a daily part of life, being built into those thousands of use cases over time. And so what that means for Kaleido is there's a huge market opportunity for us. So more hyper growth, more partners. We can't do everything, but we've found our sweet spot in the market with kind of high quality infrastructure and focus on enterprise, and just lots of exciting growth ahead, I think.
So you're saying, 3x, 5x, depending on the market segment. You don't have revenue numbers now. Are you planning on a fundraise? You have one consensus is the main backer. Are you looking into getting other backers?
Yeah, we we haven't publicly released a lot of information, but what I'll say is stay tuned. I think we're really excited about the growth that we're seeing, and kind of, if you think about the stages of a startup, of kind of starting with a hypothesis and then building a product and achieving product market fit, we feel like we're kind of on the back end of that, really focused on growth now. And so for us, I think having proven out with some of these examples and others, we're focused on growth ahead, and that probably means taking in more capital and bringing on additional partners into the mix.
Mm-hmm. So you have a team of about 23 at the moment. You're based in Raleigh Founded's Capital Club. Were those was that where Pendo was based, in Capital Club, or were they based?
Pendo started at the warehouse.
At the warehouse.
Reporting out of today, yeah.
But
their Capital Club just basically opened up 2 or 3 months before we moved in.
Okay. So are you planning on moving out anytime soon, or hiring more people to build up your team?
We're definitely hiring. We have a couple key posts we're always hiring for, because we're looking for a very special type of engineer. And we have sort of that mix of enterprise know-how and knowledge with this startup ethos and the way people like to work. It's very collaborative, and just the pride and sense of ownership of jumping in when you see a gap. So there's a lot, I guess, on the culture side we could talk about about the company. But I think for now we have a whole floor of the building, so we're pretty well set up in terms of space. Mm-hmm. I think that the floor is rated for a team up to 3 times the size of our team now. So we've got a lot of great design and breakout rooms and conference rooms and fun rooms that we get to use, but they could conceivably expand if we're bringing more people on board. I did want to backtrack a little bit when you had said just mentioned the revenue numbers. So because of all the growth during COVID and how well we're doing with customers, and we were actually cash flow positive.
Yes.
So this gives us some flexibility in terms of timing. We do see tremendous growth in the market, as we've talked about, and our clients' sort of needs and solutions and types of products and ways we can access people in different markets that we think continuing to grow the team to achieve that very high level of growth is important. So as Steve mentioned, that's tied to future capital raises as well.
And is it important for you to remain headquartered in Raleigh, or where do you see Kaleido headed?
Yeah, well, we plan to remain headquartered here. We definitely, as you look at getting close to the customer, we're going to need at least sales and marketing type sales, especially, or some tech sales or pre-sales people located in country close to those geographies. And we do work with all the largest SIs in the world. So we have lots of different ways we feet on the ground in different countries, but I think just as part of growing and as the market continues, it's just the beginning of a decade-long shift in the way people work, means we're going to have significant growth and footprint in other geographies.
We love the mix of talent that's here. It's pretty impressive, that we've. If you look at sort of some of the folks on Kaleido, they come from companies like IBM and Cisco, but also from other startups in the area. And so we really like, in fact, I'll share a short story. We had, someone was asking, hey, if you're trying to hire blockchain engineers, you're looking globally, right? There's only so many of those out there. And we said, no, we're looking for strong engineers who are really curious about new technologies, and that's worked really well for us. There's just such good roots in this area around core engineering. So we certainly, as far as we can see into the future, think that our sort of core operations are here. And what a lot of startups do, as they grow is focus on global operations, so sales teams and turning the lights on in different regions and developing a presence. So we certainly think that will be a part of the growth story going forward. But as far as core engineering goes, this region really gives a lot of opportunities to us.
I think the secret's out on that, though.
But you're, from our last conversation, you're going big. I mean, this is go big time and, you know, you're looking and potentially seeing yourselves as a $1 billion company?
Definitely, and I don't think there's any sort of limit to what can be achieved. If you look at, you know, the companies. In fact, there's already, you know, $100 billion company created, or near $100 billion company in Coinbase, and they really capitalized on the first use case that came along, which was Bitcoin itself as an investment vehicle. Essentially, they have kind of the wallet and the secure storage of your investment. But now you're seeing other companies coming along that are valued in the 5 to 10 billion, you know, exchanges. Again, just those earlier use cases. What's really cool in our space, just a quick word on, you know, DeFi, is if any in the audience have heard of that, decentralized finance. It's the, you know, the idea there is using, you know, the ability to move value around really quickly in these tokens and stable coins and other things to essentially rebuild a lot of core financial services around lending and interest and yields and risk and so on. So many new instruments being created. And that's an example of the next wave that's coming of sort of, you know, core bits of the economy that are really being rebuilt on these new decentralized, you know, technologies that are out there. And so for a company like Kaleido that's really focused on that big wave and those thousands of use cases, we don't see a ceiling to how far we can go with this.
And you're keeping your eye on the Raleigh skyline, right? Because tell me about that.
Yeah, I think I had shared when we were scouting locations, we came and looked at what was called HQ at the time. Now it's Raleigh founded. And then we also looked in Durham, we looked in RTP. They had different options. But just, you know, looking at the skyline of Raleigh, thinking, you know, this felt like the right place, and Raleigh Founded was a great partner, but with the vision of, you know, growing here for a number of years, moving to our own building, and then having the Kaleido logo and helping be a new addition, tech addition to the skyline downtown.
I love it. Red hat, Hando, Kaleido. I think it rolls off the tongue. Well, on that note, I want to thank you guys for being here and doing this is we did it. It's a wrap. Our first Techwire live in Earfluence. Thank you so much.
It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.